This is Michael S. Jenkins, and today I'd like to talk a little bit about Gann's use of astrology in the stock market and why this important subject should be studied by everyone who trades stocks. Over the past 48 years, I have been a professional trader, and it was back in 1977 to 1978, I believe, that I borrowed from Billy Jones many of Gann's original charts to copy. I spent most of my time examining the small little astroglyphs along the corners of the charts, and it really took another 10 years or so of hard work just to get to the basic understanding of what he was doing. You see, Gann said no one will ever figure out my methods because they combine not just astrology but numerology. So this is what I have done the past 40 years, and while there are numerous pundits out there who claim they understand Gann, the vast majority of the stuff that I've seen, I don't think they really get it. So it is my intention here to give you some insight into what it's really all about. This lesson will only scratch the surface of the real secrets, and I refer you to my 3-volume set of Gann astrology methods if you really want to know the real truth. My 2 previous YouTube videos on forecasting the stock market, the secrets of science of mathematics, will give you a hint as to the normal geometric methods of use and some numerology, but it is the astrology that lies at the basis of all cycles, and so this is what we need to cover today. Here's a picture of Gann in his younger years. Here's another one just before he died in 1955. Here is a copy of my website, and you'll notice in the upper right hand corner here it says Gann Astro Trilogy Set. If you click on this glyph right here, it will take you to some introductory material that you may find interesting, along with a description of the various astro sets. I will say if you can buy them individually or all as a unit for a discounted price. The first volume, though, is necessary and includes all the computer programs you will need, and a couple of them that I'll demonstrate today in this video. But basically, the origins of it are ancient. They come from the Judeo-Christian Bible, but even much, much farther back in the Indian Vedic scriptures, we talk about the planet. And in Genesis, God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night." He also said the greater light to rule the day, the lesser to rule the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons. Then God commanded Moses, who set up a lunar calendar for the Jewish people, with the first day always being the new moon. And that would mean the mid of the month, the 15th, would be the lunar full moon. So this was really an eclipse calendar, because often you'll get the solar eclipse would be the first day of the month and the lunar eclipse on the 15th. The 12 tribes of Israel, of course, and the 12 disciples of Christ represent the 12 constellations of the zodiac. If you look up Jacob's blessings of his 12 children, they describe in very good detail the nature of the constellations for horoscope delineations. Other things in there you'll read in the first book. There's quite a bit about the Bible and the origins of astrology. It says, "I will judge thee in the place where thou wast created, in the land of thy nativity." This refers to a natal horoscope, and God's judgments come from how one handles the challenges set up at the moment of birth, represented by these planets and house positions. So basically, it's an ancient science. It's in there. There's all kinds of references throughout the Bible and the scriptures as to astrology and its use, and the names of the gods and the days of the week and all the numbers and numerology that is involved. The other roots of it is in the Masonic teachings. Gann, of course, was a Mason. He belonged to the New York Astrological Society, where he met every month with such greats as Llewellyn George and Frank Higgins, who was the master of all the Masonic teachings, Cesario, perhaps one of the greatest astrologers ever, whose name was William Gorin Old. Also, I think Manly Hall was part of the New York Astro Society. So Gann clearly was an astrologer. Here's one of Gann's typical charts, and it clearly is a horoscope of a type. It says down here October eggs, May 28, 1932, so he was trading eggs here. And it's a horoscope. We can see there's the 12 houses of the zodiac, and he's got Aries, Taurus, Gemini, the signs of the constellations. Here he's got a little glyph for Mars and Venus and Jupiter, but he's got another Mars over here and another Mars over here. So clearly what he's doing is combining one horoscopic wheel with several different dates and horoscope positions. These could have been major highs or lows in the market, or they may have been different reorganizations of exchanges that traded eggs. It could be a number of events, but he wanted to know where the specific degrees were of the various planets whenever he was trading eggs. And we'll see why he really did that as we go through this. This next chart is also of eggs in a little bit different format, and this is where some of Gann's numerology comes in. We see he's got up here October, May 28, 1932. There was an October low of 1510, and he's doing a square here. This is a square of 4. It goes 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5, 6, 7, 8. So he's making a square of 4, but he's putting the low price in, and he's incremented by 25. So he's got 1525, 1550, 1575, etc., and it goes around. And then he's setting up the various dates. Now he starts it with May 28th as his first day of spring, basically, if you're familiar with the Gann square of 9 things. His actual first day of spring is down here for March, but he starts off with this wheel. Remember, it's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. So it starts off on this origin at the east. And then he's going every 22.5 degrees with these angles, 22.5, 45, 67. So he goes all the way through here, and he puts the dates of the year that will be these harmonic breakpoints in the price of eggs. We'll get into the use of this as we go through it, but this is just a cursory example of some of the technical things that he was doing. This is a more familiar chart to many of you. It's been around for a number of years because people use it to demonstrate that Gann was an astrologer. This is a chart of May soybeans, and we can see here that Jupiter, the little glyph for Jupiter here, and he's plotting it. There's little dots here where he's plotting out the longitude of Jupiter on a day-by-day basis. He's got here 430 Sagittarius. Well, the zodiac, each sign of the zodiac has 30 degrees in it, so the 30th degree is also 0 Capricorn, the first degree of the next sign. But he's saying that all of the 9 signs up till Sagittarius are done, so 30 degrees in each sign times 9 is 270, and if we look at his scale, here's 268, 9, 270. He's drawn a horizontal line, thinking that as Jupiter changed sign from Sagittarius to Capricorn, it would create a top in the market. But more specifically, he was looking at Jupiter and he was looking at Mars. Here's a little glyph for Mars, and here's some dots on it where he's plotting it day by day by day, and they're both going up to a conjunction on a given date, and this conjunction would take place. This is 1948. Here we see November. We'll get to the end of November, and here's my little program down here. I set it for November 1948, November 30th, and we see on December 1st there was a conjunction of both Mars and Jupiter. Now the way this little program works is that the first planet here is in this first box, so this is an ephemeris of Mars. Over here is an ephemeris of Jupiter, and this is the angle between both of them, and we can see that the angle is 0 or 0.1. During that day it would have been perfectly 0, and it took place at 273 degrees. Both Mars and Jupiter are at 273, and we look at his chart. Here's 272, here's 276. If we can count these little degrees, this red line here is 273, where both planets converged, and that's where he was predicting there would be a top, and he was going to go short with a stop at that level, and the rest is history, as you can see. Since I did mention my little program down here, this is one of the programs included in my Volume 1 of my Astro text. I'll demonstrate it briefly here to show you it, because we're going to see it some more here. It basically makes it much easier to do the planetary stuff. If you just want to, like the example I was just doing was, we put the year in first, 1948, and point 1130. So as long as you enter the dates this way, then it will give us the longitude of the planets. Now the planets are over here. This is the Sun. If we want to look at Mars, the 5th planet, and Jupiter, the 6th planet, and we'll put it as a pair. Now we're going to get ephemeris for each day of the week. And here's the Mars, 72, 73, 74. These are longitudes as Mars is moving through the sky. And this is the distance traveled in a straight line from this origin point. Over here is the Jupiter one, and it's going through the sky. And over here is where we see the conjunction. It came down to 0, 0.43, 0.10, and it goes up again. So this is only a daily observation. Sometime during the day it would have got to precisely 0 here. And so on 12/1 is when we see the 273. So we'll be using this program in a number of cases from various highs and lows. We can use different planets if we don't do pairs. We can do like just the Sun. This is the longitude of the Sun every day. If we wanted to see when it would have moved 90 degrees from this date, we could just go down here, the distance traveled, and when we see it has accumulated to 90 degrees, we would find out this would be our date. So this is one of the programs that we'll be using to demonstrate these slides today. You've seen this symbol a lot, I'm certain, and it shows about the mathematics of the universe. There is a circle, and then there is a square inside the circle, and then there is a trine inside the circle. And if you look real close, you will see the Great Pyramid here, which is also involved in these high-level mathematics of the Masonic Temple. But basically, in all astrology, whenever there is a point, a high or a low, or a given degree, we want to do harmonics to it. We want to take quarters and thirds and halves. So whatever degree is here, 90 degrees later is represented by the square, and 90 degrees after that, 180, and then 90 degrees after that. So this would give us dates during the course of the year. And then the trines, 120 degrees later, 120 degrees later, and 120 degrees later. And these will give us astrological breakpoints in harmonics that will be applied to stocks. We see here from one of Gann's commodity courses that he was using these forecast harmonics. He doesn't specifically mention astrology here, but we see he's got minor changes occur 7 days, 10 days, 14, 20, 21. These are moon cycles. Every 7 days the moon moves 90 degrees, so that's your square. So 90 degrees, 180 degrees, 270 degrees, you know, in the full 360. The 10s are 120 degrees. So here's 120 degrees of the moon, and here's 240 degrees of the moon. So in that last picture I showed you with the circle and the trine and the square, that's what he's doing. These are the square points, these are the trine points. Then on the monthly rules, he says changes occur every 30, 60, 90 days. Well, these are the 12 tribes of Israel divided into the 360 degrees in a year to give you the houses of the zodiac. So as a planet goes through each of the houses, it gets a different flavoring. You saw on that other chart, again, at 270, when Jupiter was going to change sign, he expected a different flavor to the chart of soybeans and perhaps a top, and it was going down. So he is, in his commodity courses, his stock courses, he often didn't mention the astrology except in one particular course he had where he comes right out and says it's planets, but he usually kept that information to himself and to his private students. Now this is where he really puts it all together. Remember, the most basic principle is time is equal to price. When people use the word time and price, you got to remember this is a secret buzzword. Time means astrological longitude. It is the horizontal movement of the planets, the longitudinal movement, that gives rise to the price lift. So if you have a planet moving 50 degrees horizontally, the price will go up 50 units, either 50 cents, $50, $5, $500. There'll be a direct correspondence. This is Gann's one-to-one principle. We see what he's doing here. He's saying from the extreme low or high. Now the extreme low here in soybeans was 44 cents. You add or subtract the proportionate parts of the circle. That's what we saw, the circle with the squares and the trine in it. So he's adding the full circle first, 360 to get 404 because the current price was up in that area. Then from the 404 you can subtract 90, which is the square. And 90 gives 314, and the degree in the sign is 14 Aquarius. So the first 10 signs would be 300, and Aquarius is the 11th house of the zodiac, so you got 14 extra. So you're in Aquarius at 14. So the reason he's doing this is because it's not just the price of 314. Note that he's adding degrees of a circle to this to get a potential price at 314. But he's also saying if any planet hits 14 Aquarius, it will be the equivalent of a price of 314. Even if the price is only 290, let's say. If the planet hits 14 Aquarius, it will be equivalent of 314. It will be a harmonic turn indicated from a low of 44. So he goes on to do this. He does make a mistake here. He says if you subtract 90 from 14, it's 230. It's really 224 and 14 Scorpio. Then over here he does the trine parts, 360, 76 3/4 in the sign of Gemini. Well, Aries and Taurus are 30 and 60, and Gemini is the next sign, so that would be 60, and you got 16 3/4 left over. So it's 45 minutes is 3/4 of 1 degree. Then he's subtracting 120. So again, the trines here. And then he's taking from the first day of trading in soybeans. He says the first sale was 120. Add 180 gives 300, or 30 degrees in Capricorn. So it's really 0 Aquarius. So he's saying, first of all, he's predicting price levels, saying at 300 it will stop dead in its tracks. Or if anything gets to 30 Capricorn or 0 Aquarius, it will also be a harmonic of the very first trade. So we're going to develop this idea and see how Gann was using the square and the trine in the circle, relating it to astrological degrees of the zodiac. Here's one of Gann's typical charts, and he had 36 or 40 of different ones that I have. This is the square of 9, of course. It goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 out to 9, and then it goes out to another rung, and he's got the odd squares going on this row, and he's got the even squares going up here, and he starts with the first day of spring. It always goes out from 1 to 2 is where your March should be. So he starts March out here. It's also good intraday for hourly charts. So at dawn at 6 a.m. is the same as spring. Then he's going every 22.5 degrees. Each of these angles here in the corners are going to be 45-degree angles, so this would be 22.5, and he's got the dates. So he's trying to get a correspondence set up with numbers and with dates of the year. Here's another one of his charts here. This is a wheel of 24, especially good with 24 hours in a day. But different things, he says this is for grains. So again, he's setting up correspondences of numbers with various degrees and dates of the year that will resonate to these numbers. Here's the famous hexagon chart. 6 sides, it's like a square of 6. And it's curious that Gann always used the planet Saturn in the hexagon chart, and only in the past couple of years have scientists discovered that on the North Pole of Saturn there is this beautiful hexagon that's formed the planet. So the hexagon chart is used for a lot of things, and just like the other charts, you have days of the week around the sides usually, and there's a series of numbers that it will go to before it hits each of these breakpoint angles on it. But the primary thing that everybody gets confused on is this unit of time equals price. And so everybody gets confused about the 45-degree angle, and they spend hours of time trying to draw 45 on their chart and getting their chart scale. It has nothing to do with 45 degrees. Okay, it's a cosmic joke. The diagonal of a square is the square root of 2. And Gann uses a lot of ratios in his work and a lot of square roots in his work. But basically, these are planetary longitudes. So the market will only turn when there is an equilibrium of time and price. Planetary movement and price distance, when they're equal, you will get a turn in the market. So here's a time unit. This might be the sun for one day. 1 degree a week might be the planet Jupiter. 1 degree a month would be the planet Saturn. Here's a half a degree, really an hour, which would be the moon. So these are all different planetary speeds, and you see they give us different slopes. But every one of these slopes, by definition, is a 45-degree angle because the unit of time and the unit of price is identical. We don't have to worry about scaling our charts when we use the planets because we know our origin point, we know how far we've gone over in the planetary distance, and if the price is up that amount or a numerological equivalent of that amount, it is a square route and the market will go down. That's what Gann's charts are all about, really. Here's a typical Gann square of 144. That's 360 divided by 2.5, which is the smallest astrological division the Hindus usually use. But each of these grids of over so much and up so much, where these intersection of all these points are at these levels, this is just basic mathematical harmonic analysis of a circle of 360. In this case, he's using a full cycle of 144, but he has squares of 90, he had squares of 52, he had squares of 360, squares of 20. Each of the various squares that he used was used to find a mathematical harmonic numerological system that would tie in with the specific commodity and the specific planet that he was using to trade them. Now let's look at some practical charts and see how we can actually use this for our own use in trading. Here's a general a picture of the Dow Jones from 1983 to the top in 87, just using the pair Jupiter and Saturn, Yahweh and Jehovah in the Bible. And we've got the conjunction of the two over here at the top, and then 60 degrees later was a little top and break. 72 is often a big break point. That's 1/5 of the circle. The quintiles usually break the markets. 90 was the beginning of this top phase, and 120 was the big top of the parabolic. So we can see there are some interesting break points in sections of a market, and we're going to try and get more specific now. Here, for instance, is a Mars-Jupiter one of 360 degrees, or one full cycle. If we started at this high on 5/19 in 2008, and we took Mars and Jupiter a full 360 degrees, you would get over here another major turn. So usually the major turns come out at full cycles. Here's an example of, we know the big top in 2000, it was really March 24th, but if we go back about 10 days earlier, there was a conjunction of Jupiter and Mars on that date, heliocentrically. There's 3 different zodiac types we're going to use: Geo, Helio, and Right Ascension. Most of these will use Geo, but Helio comes out a lot at times. So this example will show Helio. So from that top in 2000, if we go down a distance moved in the angle, we find out that on the low, March 6th, March 8th, 2009, it was exactly 4 cycles of 360. So there was a full 4 cycles of 360 from that. And just like here, this was a 1 full cycle. Well, if we started at that year 2000 and did 3 of those cycles, we would have got down to March of 2008 low. Now, if we started at the March 6, 2009 actual low, and then move forward 3 cycles of 360 or 1080 degrees distance moved, we find that comes out on 11/8/2015. Well, what was that? Do you recall? Well, here's 11/8/2015. It's just like one day after the big top. And if you look at this in terms of history, from this point, that was a pretty good indication that there was a major trend coming up. Then, going back to that first top way back in 2000, if we go 8 times 360 is 2880. That was supposed to be our final high, but it broke a touch early. On January 29th of 2018, it got to 2866. The open on that day was 2867. The high was 28.7, and then the market reversed and went down hard. So the reason it topped before the 2880 was that this is like a trend line. So it was hitting its head right smack on the trend line, and time and price would square out. The price was at the trend line price, so it turned it down. And what happened when it got to 2880 distance moved, that was your big major low. I think it was March 2nd or March 3rd, and then the market turned up again. So these long distances of 1 cycle, 3 cycles, 4 cycles, 8 cycles, these are very important to keep track of. So let's look at some of these Mars-Jupiter degrees and see what else is in store here. Well, here was that big top we just showed, and then it broke down, and then right over here was where the 360 or the 280 actually came out in time. So this one turned out to be a low. This was an actual chart I sent out to my day trading friends who subscribe to my daily email service. And I was saying, was this yesterday? You see, the previous cycle of 360 gave us the same fractal pattern. And these fractals, remember, when you go through a certain longitude, you have to go the same vertical distance. We can use that rule backwards and say, if you find a vertical distance of a prior cycle, it will give you the same vertical distance when it hits again. So I was surmising at that point that we should have been right here, right at this point right here. That's what I said yesterday when I sent this one out. Well, this is what actually happened. Here's where I said yesterday, and we can see it did follow the other patterns. It went straight up. If you actually go back before that, so if we go back from this one, this was 360 back. If we go back other cycles past that, we get over here. This was 3 times 360 backwards. And again, shape is pretty similar. Same little bottoming thing. You had a little head fake here that was a little different. Then a big leg up. But we had the same vertical distances. So when we're using this, and this is what's so great about the Gann method and knowing the planets, that you can plot these out and you know when these big giant crashes are going to occur. And you can go short up here and you know they're not going to bottom till they get to this level. Think how much money you could make with puts or calls on the big stocks when you know that these things are coming up. Here's another way to use the planets as a square root when time and price are equal. Here was the March 6, 2009 low was 666. Why don't we just take a planet and move it the distance 666? Comes out right here at the exact top day. Then it starts to come down, and if you recall, this was the first 1,000-point down day crash, a flash crash over here as it started to come unglued. But that was a square root, a geometric square root of price and time. Here's the time is equal to the price. There's also lunar cycles. I said in the introduction about God made the 2 great lights to rule the day and the night. Well, the lunar cycles are also important. The regular solar-lunar cycle, every 29.5 days, is the new moon and the full moons. And so if you did 12 of those in a year, the lunar year would be 354 days. So from this big low on Google to this big low right here is exactly 354 days. But we can also do a cycle from here based on the lunar sidereal year. This means how far the moon goes around the sky to conjunct the same star. So when let's say it was 0 Aries, it goes around to conjunct 0 Aries again. That only takes 27.5 days. And so 12 times that would come out right here. Now the difference between the two, you see, is that when the moon moves 27.5 days to where it returned, in that 27 days the sun, its companion, has moved also another 27 degrees. And the moon moves 12 to 13 degrees a day. So it will take about 2.5 days longer from 27 to get up to where the sun is. So that's why the sun and the moon together take 29.5 days this day. But you can take highs and lows and from IPO dates and things with these lunar cycles, and they will give you very accurate hits. We can use planets as trend lines. Here was an old top, 2104, and I'm using a Mercury trend line. And we use the basic principle of either square the high, square the low, or square the range. The range from a high to a low is this amount. So if we draw our trend line, it will square the range when it gets to 2104. Well, this line is a Mercury trend line. And we use my little program to start at the low, February 8th. And we put in here, or February 11th, so here's 211, 216. I hit the trend line box and put 1810, which is the low. And then my cumulative distance is really this trend line. For each degree that Mercury moves, the trend line will grow. And I want to find out when will it hit the 2104. And I find down here between 420 and 421, it gets to 2102 to 2107, because Mercury moves about 4 degrees a day. So somewhere between the 20th and 21st, it will square out. And by law, when time and price, the price here is the range, when time and price are squared by law, the market has to reverse and go down. Here's some general 360 cycles of Mercury. This is my Optima software. I used to be the old market analyst, and what's nice about that is it will put in astrological things into the future for you if you want. So I just picked a high at random, and I said let's do every 360 degrees of Mercury. So here we have a high, boom, here's the low, here's one right here, here's one right here, here's one midpoint, here's a high, here's a low, here's another one. I started from a different date, a big high over here, there's another high, here's a low blast off, here's a big crash, here's like a high. Now you may say here's a perfect hit almost here. You may say, well, you're off by a day or two, but remember, it's not just one planet. There are multiple planets involved. When you plot out these cycles, you will be able to see if there's another planet or if there's a pair of Jupiter or Saturn, and the numerology, if let's say you had a Jupiter Saturn approaching a 360 cycle and the Mercury cycle was just coming out, but maybe the other 360 came out a day or two early. So these are little things which is the art of the speculation, where you have to give it a little bit of slippage in here, but otherwise it's quite accurate. Let's talk for a minute about the idea of a horoscope, because this is the hardest thing to grasp. To the educated, rational mind, it makes no sense at all, especially on the New York Stock Exchange. They said a group of men stood under the buttonwood tree in 1792, and they traded stocks. And that was supposedly May 17th, 1792. They had some kind of agreement. I'm just using 12 noon here. I think the more accurate date some astrologers use is like 8:54 a.m. But there are various dates, but it's not that important because the planets won't move that much in one day. So here's what the general horoscope looks like. Then we have some things. We have like Neptune at 27, and we have the Sun at 27, and Saturn's almost at 27. So these are going to be hot points in the chart anytime anything hits 27. And indeed, you got Jupiter at 22 with a close conjunction of Neptune. Anytime any big planet comes through 22 to 27, it's going to hit the Saturn, it's going to hit the Mercury, it's going to hit the Sun. It's going to make harmonic aspects to these. So how would we use this? Well, here's two rungs. The first rung inside is that same horoscope we just looked at. The outer rung over here is February 25th, 2015. And I chose that because on that date, as the planets in the real world move around every day, the room, the inner wheel from 1792 is fixed, never changes. But in the real world, the planets are constantly moving. Well, on that date, we see Jupiter was exactly on top of Uranus. So you would expect some unexpected bullish thing that was occurring on that date. So let's take a look and see what that date was. And here it is right here. February 24th to 25th, Jupiter was conjunct Uranus right here. And then because of a retrograde, it went backwards, it came back again and conjunct Uranus right here. And then it moved on and it hit 60 degrees from the Jupiter right here. The node of the moon, conjunct the node right here just before the crash. Here's Saturn was 45 degrees from Jupiter in that chart. Big top. Saturn was 120 degrees from Uranus. Neptune 45 from Saturn. Anyway, look at these hits. This is not accidental just numerology. These are actual facts based on a horoscope from 1792. So you might want to check it out. Here's another horoscope of interest. The inner wheel here is soybeans. Gann showed us in that earlier letter he had that they were born on October 5th, 1936. So here's the soybean chart. And of interest in the natal soybean chart is the fact that Neptune was 1728 and it was opposite Saturn at 17 Pisces 24. So usually anything that's going to hit the number 17 going around will have an impact on soybeans. So we see the big planet Pluto, which is death and destruction, annihilation. The phoenix lives 500 years, dies in fire, and is reborn. Usually there's big highs and lows in history when that hits it. So you got Pluto on the Neptune, opposite to Saturn, and Saturn recently was just over near the Saturn II. So there might be something in the soybean chart on that date. Well, let's take a peek. Not a bad hit. Wouldn't you like to know about that if you were trading soybeans? Here's also from that chart. In that natal chart, Uranus was located at 38.59 degrees of the zodiac. And Gann loved the number 7, the death zone. 7 times that number of degrees is 270. Now, it's also very close to the just plain astrological 270. But I think it's doubly important because it was 7 times its natal position. Anyway, when Uranus got to 270 degrees from the date of birth, this is what happened to soybeans, exactly to the day. Boom. Very interesting. So let's go back and look at this again, what we're really seeing. He's saying we can take a number, and that number can also be an astrological degree. Or we can take the astrological degree first, and that might give us a number. So he's mixing and matching. He's saying time is equal to price. Price is equal to time. And when they are equal, when we are at 314, it's the same as being at 44. Or when we are at 14 Aquarius, it's the same at being at 44 or 314. It is a harmonic that will turn the market. So let's see how we can make money doing this. Here's Tesla. He says down here where this big blast off occurred was January 11th, and the sun's longitude, here's January 11th up here with the sun, and the longitude on that date was 291.25. So that's the longitude. Now we just saw when the longitude gives rise to a price, when price and time are equal. Well, the final high here was at 291.42. So the price equaled the longitude of the low, and that was the big top. Price and time are equal. Okay, so let's do a little more numerology. If we get that top over here, and he again says take a price here, and we can subtract 90 from it, or 120 or anything else. Let's subtract 90 from the 291, we get 202. And then we find out that the 202, it has moved in my little chart here from the 914 low over here, or excuse me, from the 94 top. It goes down 202, gives us this date down here of April 2nd. That we can take these same harmonics, we can either do a longitude, and the longitude turns into a price, or we can take a price and like Gann said, we can subtract 90, 180, 120, and get these other numbers that will either be prices along the way, or they will be future longitudes. And at the future longitudes, we will get these turning points. So let's go a little further now with this next example, and we can also do something with the initial longitude here and do a square of 9 type technique. We can take the square root of that, re-square it by 25 cents, that's a 45-degree angle on the square of 9, and we get 299.85. And we look up 299.85 in our little calculator, and we find out that hits on January 19th. So that's this low right here. So that would be a 45 degrees from this low on the square of 9 right here. Not a great move, but if you're looking at the price square scale, it's probably $30 to $40 exactly to the day. And then we also have over here, if we started with a new low, the price was 141. And then when the longitude became 141, it was August 12th. So we have price is then equal to time, and right here again, not the exact high there, but you had a little kind of flattening basing at the top area. Maybe there was a trend line coming up here, and on or about that date they gave you the breakdown and went down. Here's a different example using Amazon. If we took the low here on April 4th, it was a big price of $13.53, so we subtract 360, 360, 360, and the leftover is 273. And then we find out the date in history when it's 273 longitude, and we find out that's 1225. Lo and behold, that's the major low. So from one major low to the next major low, we have a price, or a price equivalent, is equal to time. From the top up here, we had a big price of 2,050, so down 5 times 360, 251 is left over. So 251 is the price, equals the longitude on December 3rd. From the big top here, an equivalent longitude is equal to price right here, and you get the next top. So these things are all pretty precise. You may be off by one day here and there, but you're coming up with major swings, and if you play with puts and calls and things, this is extremely valuable information. But even though I show you this, which is extremely valuable, I want to emphasize I'm just barely scratching the surface about what it's all about. There are some really unique mathematical things that I do, and I do show in these books I've written and again used to show you the long-term highs and lows and sequences and things. But this is just a heads up on what's it all about. So we look at these things too. In the square of 9, here's our January 29th all-time high. Last year, 2883 in January of 2018. And here's the date in my little square of 9, one of my other little programs. So January 29th, the sun was located at 309.57. That's this yellow thing in here. And we note that straight up along this line is the number 2883. So the longitude here is equivalent to a price of 2883. So time equals price, and that turns the market. And that's why these big calculators, the square of 9, square of 6, square of 7, you may not note that 309 is somehow related to 2883, but it is when you use these mathematical calculators. Here's another one over here with Amazon again. We can take a starting longitude on this date, which was 49, and then we can increment it and just do longitude increments. We can take the longitude and we can add 60 to it, and we'll get 109 as a longitude. If we look up 109, it comes out right in the gap area where they blast off. If we take this 49 longitude, add 72 to it, we'll get longitude 121. Here in the chart I'm showing you the date, 7/24, when it hits the longitude of 121. then it crashes. Then the starting longitude 49 plus 90 is equal to 139. This is the date. The longitude was 139. Here's the longitude of 120 is 169. It had already come down a little bit, but this was the break point from all these other areas where it went down. Here's the 180. So you've got another low to low at the 180. Here's the 240. Now these are off a touch, but because there's two different big cycles. One of them called for a low right about here, but if we go way back over here, the low was 284 and the high was 294. The size of the bar is basically being turned sideways at times, and that's what causes the base to be over several days. It's really the width of the bar. So the longitudes would be 10 degrees of longitude, maybe almost 10 days here where you'd be squaring out the low. In this case, the final low here was when you got to longitude 294 based on a price of 294 high. We looked at that last example of just moving the longitudes. We started at a 49 longitude. We added to it the 121, 169, 289, 230, 290. So in the square of 9, they will often form these grids. Usually they'll be in straight lines. They'll be north, south, east, or west. One hit the Gann cardinal cross here. But these numbers, if you look at these real closely, you'll see 49, 121, 69, 230, 289. These are what we had over here. 109, 121, 139, 169, 229. These are what they are, and you'll see that there is some kind of mathematical structure in these various squares that have harmonics with the origin point. Now let's go back to this Gann egg chart and see what that really means. We can see now, once again, that what he's doing is he's trying to take this on a square of 4. He found out that this particular wheel has a good input for the eggs, and he starts with his price of 1510, and then the first rung here on the one is 1525, 1550, and he has the regular numbers in here too. He's got these circled over here because on this particular layout, the odd squares, 3 squared, 5 squared, 7 squared, they go along this rung. So anytime he got the prices up here, 1725, 2125, 2175, these would be like odd squares and they'd be doubly important. So he's circling those there. And then these are the various dates we can add to where he's going. This is June 14th, which is 22.5 degrees or days basically from the May 28th. And then 45 days later, or is July, I guess it's June 12th, July 14. These charts that Gann had, the triangle charts, the square charts, the square 144, all these things are really basically harmonics of numerology and the numbers being related to planetary longitudes and prices. And if you go against the angle, if you got up here to 3500, you'd be hitting an angle. You'd be finding resistance in time on this. If you were on this date, you would be on an angle. If you're on this price, you would be on the angle. So this is just harmonic analysis of the rule that time equals price, relating a number and an astrological degree as equivalents, and relating it to the astrological degrees as time, and then finding what is the common denominator of the specific stock or commodity you're trading. So this is just a brief introduction to what it's all about. I've spent my whole life doing this. You can look at my other YouTube videos. If you really have an interest in this, you can look at my website and look at the planetary volumes. There's a number of examples on each of those. And as I said, the first volume alone has a whole bunch of computer programs that make it very, very easy to do this stuff. And this would be a good introduction to what it's all about. Thank you for listening.